Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. Today I am joined by Gary Armstrong, who is the founder and coach at Pinnacle Coaching Development. Great to have you on board here today, Gary. Welcome.
Thanks very much for having me, Paul. Lovely to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Well, before we get into a bit more about Pinnacle and what you do in that space, can you give us a bit of a background in terms of what got you to where you are today?
Oh, that's a big question. I'll try and keep this brief, Paul, as brief as I possibly can. Background-wise, I've had, I'm going to badge it as a wide and varied career, and I've been very lucky. I graduated with a degree in economics way back. Love that subject. It's all about how why people do what they do, and that will become relevant later on.
Right.
And I then went into business. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I was going to do some stuff in business. So I was a management consultant for about 9 years at two different consulting firms. It was all very analytical, lots of international flying about, that sort of stuff. But we did a lot of work in healthcare, biotech, pharma. And if there is a theme running through my my career, it would be a real willingness to maybe do some different stuff. Nothing like wildly different. You're not going to hear some of the variety that you've got in your background. But I think what I've always been looking for is trying to figure out what is that thing I should be doing.
Right.
And I knew it wasn't management consulting after a little while. I then, after 8 or 9 years doing that, I was then brought, kind of headhunted to go in-house at a large healthcare pharmaceutical company. So effectively kind of do what I've been doing in management consulting. But already the red thread was kind of there, which was I was figuring out that I liked to help people get better at what they do. I had this sort of compassionate streak of hating to see people stuck or suffering or not being as effective as they could be, that sort of thing. I've been blessed in my time at GlaxoSmithKline. I've recently just left,
Right.
but I had 16 years there where I started on the business side, and my exit has been very solidly on the people side. So I'm in the people stuff in GSK happens in HR. We still call it human resources. But I get to be on the really lovely end of HR, which is I'm in learning, development, coaching, leadership development. I will sort of spare you all the gory details of the stops along the way. But I have to say I've been really lucky. I worked in the pharmaceutical side, but also in the consumer healthcare side. So we sell things like toothpaste and painkillers and stuff. And I did some business roles there. Had a long stint as I was transitioning into HR. I did that via quite a long stint in the kind of broader office of the CEO in the kind of area that supports the chief executive, his and then her team.
Yeah.
I ran a development program and then I moved really solidly into people development, leadership programs, coaching, and I had lots of lovely, great sponsors and people who helped me along the way, and lots of kind of opportunity to sort of get there. That's the quick version, and that pull through was always like, how can I get better at and get closer and do more full time, this thing about helping people get where they want to go and be as good as they can be and figure out their purpose and all that.
Oh, helping people perform it. You've come to the right place.
Well, this is it. I mean, this is how our paths crossed, isn't it?
It is.
We both knew a couple of people that were like, you two should talk to each other.
No, that's brilliant, and a lovely sort of varied, and I can align to some of those elements and experiences along the way, the consultancy world, and then moving more in-house and things like that. And just interested to pick up on a couple of the points in terms of management consultancy. It's a specific world. It's a specific operating model in terms of how people work and play and do all the rest of it. What were some of your key learnings from that space that you, either the good, the bad, the ugly?
Wow. It was a foundational time in my career. I thought I worked pretty hard at, I know a lot of people don't work hard at uni, but I thought I worked quite hard at uni, and then I joined management consulting. My goodness me, I found out what long hours was and that sort of thing. So what did I learn? I learned a couple of things early on, which was get good at some kind of almost basic technical things.
Mm.
Some things that like, and I'm going to be really specific here, like just get really good at running numbers on a spreadsheet, producing a forecast, writing a document, writing a presentation. Just get really good and efficient at doing those, and I will always be grateful for those skills. It's just sort of part of my range. I picked up a really strong understanding of client service and quality.
Right.
I worked with the managing partner of the London office of one of the firms I work with. I'm still in contact with him a little bit, but he had really good ethics around if we're going to do this, we're going to do it well. And
Mm.
he wasn't he was also very balanced in his approach to things, but I absolutely got from him that we're doing something if it's worth doing and you're doing it for a client, do it well.
Mm.
Be proud of what you do. Um, and I think probably that maybe the last, I mean, so much I took away from it. A lot of stamps in my passport.
Right.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I look back at it, it was ridiculous. It was a different time in my life. I didn't have my dependents, and I did, and it gave me an incredible belief in my ability to go into different companies and different situations and be useful and build relationships and help. I think maybe the last thing that I would say I took from it though was as I was figuring out I probably wasn't going to be a career management consultant, I was
Mm.
starting to ask myself, and I got a lot of support from my first organization actually as I was exiting. I think they would have loved me to have stayed, and I in many ways would have loved to have stayed with them. But I was figuring out why isn't this going to fit for me? What I figured out was if I was going to stay, the type of management consultant I was going to be was a bit of a firm builder and not in the business development, go and build more clients. Probably not a firm builder in the I'm going to push forward on this practice area, but a firm builder around the people
Right.
and them as individuals, their growth, their career, their development. I was like, oh, that just had that affinity and warmth for me. So as well as learning all that great
Mm.
management consulting stuff. And I know there's also some not great stuff. They are, as you said, specific environments
Yeah.
that if we're going to be judgmental, there are some things that I don't always love. But I would be grateful for that thing I learned about me in that process,
Mm.
which was even in that kind of high performance, edgy environment, I was already like, this is going to be about people for me on some level down the line. So I took that away.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly echo some of those lessons. I spent a few years in that world, and I did see a transition actually in terms of going from the sort of 20 hours a day working is the best thing in the world, that you that's the thing to do to impress clients, moving through to you need a more sustainable approach to
Mm.
your delivery, and looking after the people in the organization as well, with the company that I work for, and I noticed that in quite a few others as well. So
Yeah,
I think it's changing, isn't it, that world?
it's got to. If you're a management consultant and you're dishing out advice, you've kind of got to role model it a bit.
Mm.
And a lot of them do have now, like practices around human development, organization consulting, organization development. You can't be kind of shipping in these sort of 23-year-olds who look like, they're bog-eyed and you can tell they've been working all night
Mm.
on a spreadsheet and a PowerPoint in a hotel room. It's not a good look.
So you made that move from the management consultancy more in house. How did you find that? What were what was the culture shift for you, and
Oh,
how did it fit?
absolutely immense. But it happened in two stages. My first consulting firm was small, entrepreneurial. Everyone did everything. It was a deliberate choice when I actually kind of left uni going way back. I wanted that sort of experience. I actually then joined a larger consulting firm, which had a big legacy business, and that was already like, there's a lot of process and systems and a lot more structure around this, and it's a lot more commercial. We
Right.
report quarterly results, that sort of thing, having come from a sort of privately held smaller consulting firm, and then you go into a large corporate organization. It was GlaxoSmithKline. It was a good few years after it, a merger, lots and lots of mergers in
Yeah.
healthcare, as in lots of industries. So the culture shock was all around how do I get stuff done
Mm.
around here? I figured out that and it still is in many, many ways, and like lots of companies, lots of Anglo-American companies, it's a very warm, people-centered, highly networked organization and a great inspiring organization in many ways, but you've almost got to kind of get in there, become part of the network, build your relationships.
Mm.
The emphasis in my previous career on being able to churn through problems, get stuff done, be competent, be innovative. Not that the big companies aren't innovative. It was a little. I had to pick up a whole bunch of other things about how do we get stuff done.
Mm.
And one of my big reflections, you asked about lots of great things about the culture.
Mm.
Lots and lots of great things. One thing I did notice though was it was a bit siloed. I remember
Right.
been in there for a couple of years, and I still had this. Well, there's a problem.
Mm.
We'll just come together as a group. We'll work on that, won't we? And I would run into, oh, no, yeah, well, we need someone from finance, and we need that's a business problem, or that's an HR problem, and it was maddening. I'm like, it's nice. It's just something that we all need to do, isn't it? And
Yeah.
why is it? So I kind of had, and I've learned that actually there's also a beauty in that, and you want expertise from the right people, and a bit of respect for process and people's turf and domain and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I had to learn my big company ways of getting stuff done. There's
Yeah.
probably people listening to this who's like, he never learned it.
Well, I know our mutual friend Phil. Big shout out to Phil on the cast here. Is one of his core skills. I've known Phil from university days, and one of his core skills is just helping people get together in an organisation like that and just find a path forward and get people together and get them to collaborate. So I think that's a really useful skill and skill set in its own right, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, let's make this the Phil podcast briefly. He is brilliant at that, and that's when our paths crossed about 3 years ago. We were both working on a really significant bit of work for the company. Phil was in a very, very hot seat, and he did exactly what you just described. He brought, it's almost that stereotypical, archetypal, diverse group of people, competing needs, pressured time scale, lots at stake. He was in a hot seat to hold a lot of us together.
Yeah.
I was the HR person, and like in many organisations, HRs were the whipping boy. Not entirely. That's not entirely true. But Phil is really good at that, and he's got that skill. And it's sort of really, organisations are funny things, and there are sometimes, often roles a little bit like Phil's role, not Phil specifically, but the role that he plays, they can get trimmed out of organizations. The people that make it work, and they often have like funny title, not even that funny. There'll be a program manager or a chief of staff or whatever. They provide this really important glue, lubrication, stick, whatever. They minimize all those sticky transactions that could happen between people. They keep us all going in the right direction. They often work with a leader as well. Really important roles. Really important.
Right, that's enough about bigging up Phil.
Yeah.
You'll never get over this. Good. So, moving then into what you do now. So, with Pinnacle, who do you help and how do you help them?
Thank you. I don't want to be too broad. You're always told to niche yourself, but I have a kind of a broad purpose, which is I help people who are stuck in some way. I help them get unstuck, and that often looks like finding their direction, their clarity, their purpose. And then I help them bring that into life. And that might be, there's a few ways I do that. I do that using a coaching skill set specifically. And by coaching, I mean the kind of it's either the really hard or soft end of coaching. The bit where I'm not telling you at all what I think you should do. So I'm not consulting. I am tuning in with you deeply, trying to ask you absolutely the right questions that helps you get unstuck and move in the right way. So I might do that coaching for you in your career, or I might do that with you around you as an individual or you as a leader and your impact on other people. So that's part of it. I also work with teams and groups of people. So I've got a background in what's known as organization development, and that is all about healthy, high-performing organizations and all the amazing, inspirational, but also odd, weird, frustrating, and mad stuff that happens when people come together to try and do something. So I've got a background in that, and I do that kind of work a little bit, still with a kind of consulting mindset, but with a coaching mindset and skill set. But you're a bit more consulting. You've got a bit more license to lean in and say, for example, to a group, a team, well, have you got a vision for this group? How does the strategy line up to that? Let's get a bit more tactical. Where are you at with your group development? how are you getting this stuff done? So that's kind of really it in a nutshell. I'm all about helping, as I said, mentioned right at the beginning. It's almost physically painful for me to experience someone who is, or a group who are not where they could be,
Right.
and that often manifests as a feeling of stuckness, a
Mm.
feeling of maybe not knowing what to do, frustration, a sense that we're not where we could be. And I've just put an enormous amount, and will forever for the rest of my career put an enormous amount of effort into trying to be good at helping people get out of that place into a better place and propel them along that journey.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, that's the high level nutshell.
And are there any particular areas, any particular fields that you work with, any particular organisations, or do you throw yourself out there open to all?
Well, brilliant question. If I'm super honest, where is my niche tended to be, and what's my affinity? If I start with individuals and people, tends to be that I'm best with folks who are a little bit into their career, so maybe mid-career, early to mid-career.
Yep.
They tend, and then it leans into the backgrounds that I've got. So professionals and all allied things, so consultants, bankers, lawyers, anyone in that sort of domain. But it has been extremely broad. IT professionals, project managers, etc. So when I'm doing career coaching, it can actually be pretty broad. If I'm in organizations, I do tend to sort of also believe that it helps if you're credible to the organization that you're working with. So clearly, I've got background in consulting,
Yep.
let's call it professional services more broadly,
Yep.
and also healthcare, biotech, pharmaceutical. So industry-wise, I sort of tend to specialize in those spaces.
Yep.
That said, though, I do a bit of voluntary coaching for example, A-level students. I work with a great charity called Giving Time.
Okay.
If you ever want to take on a really challenging, if there's any coaches listening, try coaching a 17, 18-year-old. Try like coaching 17, 18-year-old who is used to wonderful experience, amazing people. They're used to being taught or parented or mentored or whatever, and you engage in a coaching relationship where you're fundamentally giving them the power and the direction. You're listening and asking questions and facilitating them. Super challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. So I kind of mentioned that partly to your comment, do I sort of put myself out broadly?
Yeah.
I'm not sure anyone can coach anyone or anyone can necessarily help anyone that effectively, but particularly when I've got the coaching hat on, I do think that is a really broadly effective skill set,
Yeah.
and can really help, kind of broad group of people.
Yeah, I remember having the conversation in an earlier episode with Laura Siddall where we're talking about she's an international triathlete and sort of world champion in that space, and the coaching support that she gets. And like, does it have to be someone who is from that triathlete world? Does your coach have to be someone with the specific experience that you are going through? And yeah, it's an interesting dynamic where sometimes it helps, sometimes it hinders. And it's much more about the relationship that you can get with people and the sort of chemistry that you have with your coach, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm not on Laura. I listened to the Laura episode, by the way. I thought it was super interesting, and it always brings to mind the sports game. So I'm a runner outside of when I'm doing all this work.
Right.
And I don't coach people as a running coach yet, but I think I might down the line. And I've got a little bit of qualification in that. And part of what Laura brought to mind and always comes to mind with sports coaching is fundamentally what you said. It's a person-to-person thing. There's at least as much mind as there is body involved in this. And so that kind of not just the chemistry, but the ability and willingness to see them as a whole human being, not just as an athlete. They're not a machine. I think there's also something really interesting. I was listening years ago, particularly people like Laura, who are like right on the top end of this. If you're out there, and all sports evolve and they change, and all industries, they all evolve and change. If you're right on the edge of something and you're interested in pushing your boundary or the boundary of the field that you're in, at some point you're going to reach your limit and the limit of anyone else who's either been there before, and nobody's been there before because they're not you.
Right.
Nobody's been there in the way that you're there when you're leading your company or that team. So that's why I kind of lean towards the coaching rather than the consulting and the mentoring so much, because what I'm really intrigued is, well, how does it look like where you are? What's the edge for you that you're stepping onto? What do you need to do that? And nobody knows that better than the person in the situation.
Yeah.
And I find that relentlessly kind of fascinating, because it's relentlessly like unique, isn't it? Everyone's on their own frontier, whatever they do.
Yeah. That high performance can mean anything for anybody at any stage, really, can't it? In their
Absolutely.
career.
Yeah.
So about that running, I know you're in the podcast world yourself as well.
Yeah.
Getting into that. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Thank you. And we're actually at the pilot stage. You were extremely kind and you did exactly what I needed, actually. You gave some really good, candid balance. So you said about the positive, but you also gave us some really good improvement feedback. So yeah, I'm working with a colleague, a friend, Ed Perry. He had an idea for a podcast about a year ago. It's currently just in the development stage. It's called the Run Alive podcast, and we're going to explore this kind of interesting overlap that we both spotted. We're both runners.
Yeah.
We're both in human development. We know there's a lot of people in the world of human development coaching who also have a bit of a running story in their lives. So we're trying to put together kind of almost a bit of a, I mean, everyone wants their podcast to be unique, right? But exploring episodes in the lives of our guests, trying to pull out their unique lessons that we can share with other people. I think there will be a theme of running through this, but what we're definitely not doing is interviewing a runner about their career.
Right.
We're going to maybe talk to an entrepreneur who's got a unquenchable run habit, and what we might actually really be talking to them about is, well, tell us about your business and tell us about the critical moment or the critical failure. Yeah. There will be a bit of a running theme sort of going through it, but it's seeking to be one of those kind of wisdom podcasts, right? That gives people lots to chew on and helps them get where they want to get in their lives.
Great. No, I've been scribbling down. Anybody who's watching the video can see me scribbling down a few notes. I've got a couple of names again come to mind that I'm going to pass on to you as well as potential guests.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, so moving on to the next part of the podcast here, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about how do you get your performance uplifted? You know, who do you go to? Who helps you perform?
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. There's a few. Being in the people development world, I've got a wide network, and one of the great things about hanging around with people in, particularly coaches, is we can't help ourselves. We're like always asking each other. You book in like a catch up, and very quickly you're like being asked deep, penetrating questions by your network. So if I'm really honest, I get a lot from my peers. People who I kind of hang out with in the coaching space. A really important thing for me, which I've just reinitiated, is as a coach, you're meant to get supervision,
right?
And that's the process of having a trained professional who you can go to and helps you basically kind of sharpen your edge as a coach.
Yep.
Actually help you do a bit of psychological unburdening, just help you work through whatever it is that's coming up for you as you do your work, and help you improve and kind of reach towards excellence. So I've had that in the past. I've just in the last couple of days just actually fixed up a new supervisor relationship going forward, which I'm kind of very much looking forward to. Nice. So those are a couple of people. I mean, other stuff that I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I genuinely am a huge consumer of podcasts,
right?
And a real kind of reflector, and I'll save them and I'll go back to them. And there's lots in the domain of coaching and people development, and there's some real heroes that I've picked up in those, and I get an enormous amount from that. I also do a relatively decent amount of reading.
Right.
It's just the engine. I realised of a lot of what I do is having some sort of intellectual property behind me that I can really lean on. I'm just massively curious as well.
Yeah.
I do that. And then kind of the last one that comes to mind is a couple of things. I'm just about to join a kind of a bit of a network group,
right.
Who are specifically put together to synthesize all of the research in the space that I operate in and share that with professionals like mine and who host discussion groups and that kind of thing. The link there is being evidence-based is really important to me as much as I can. So I'm kind of keen to be part of that. And then the last thing is kind of friends, family. In the last few years, I've got fascinated with the idea about finding people I know inspirational and looking for almost common forms of inspiration in my friends' network, what they're doing, what they're not doing, and just really appreciating their bravery or whatever it is that they sort of bring to the party. There's something I realized that I sort of, it was important to me to find that around me, not just get that from, heroes who are kind of all the way over there. I wanted it to be almost more everyday and commonplace for me. So a bit of all of that, really.
Oh, nice. And I'm guessing running as well is it's probably an area that helps sharpen the mind. Is that when you do a lot of podcast listening, or?
Completely. Do you know, I don't. I've been through phases of listening to music and podcasts. When I run, I generally don't have anything in my ears.
Nice.
Depending on what kind of, whether I'm running with a group or not. But one of my favorite things to do is just to plan a bit of a run, go out on my own and just enjoy it, appreciate it. And, usually that runner's high kicks in about 20, 25 minutes in and can last for a while. And you'll suddenly be like, oh, some days when I get a good long run in, I come back and I say to my wife, it's like I've kind of been on holiday.
Right.
You just get a break from everything and your mind just wanders. And I'm really lucky that I find, and lots of people find it in lots of different things. I just feel especially lucky that I get to combine my sort of obsession and fascination and sort of deep need for physical activity into this thing that I find really refreshing.
Oh, lovely. Lovely stuff. And so a couple of sort of shorter questions now around if you were able to help any individual team or organisation with the skill set that you've got and you think you can make a difference and help them perform, who would you want that to be?
Individual team or organisation. So I kind of got there's two competing things in my mind. One's a bit of a cheat and then one is actually quite specific. The first group of people that cut across organisations, I've got a bit of a passion for people who are in their first leadership role.
Right.
And I work with people across the leadership spectrum, some very experienced, some kind of brand new. But I've got this real desire to want to help people who particularly, and it often happens in technical professions as well, like management consulting and other things, where you get given some leadership responsibility and you've not been prepared for it.
Right.
Or they're not supported as you step into it. And that just breaks my heart. And I do believe that well-run, well-managed organizations are the cornerstone of a well-functioning society. And just think about the impact that your manager, I mean, we've both been managed, we've both been managers, right? The impact that you can have, positive or negative, on the people around you, not just the performance of the organization, but the person, the people who are in your team and your colleagues. So that group, to guide them, help them make their first steps into leadership and ease that burden. If I had to pick an organization, and you were good enough to give me a little heads up on this question, I went round and round on this. This might be a weird answer for people. I think I'd actually like to help the police, not Sting's group from the military. Don't think they need my help. But actually, I've got a bit of a thing that I think the policing organisation, I think they perform a really important role in society. I'm not saying it because I think they necessarily massively need my help. Maybe it more comes from me that I think they perform a really important role. I think they do something that's really, really difficult. And I think it's quite a high burden, quite psychologically quite tough.
Yep.
And I know it's also an organisation with some great leadership in it, but there is also a structure and it's quite hierarchical and there's a way of running it. And also, I suppose, maybe a bit intrigued to understand how that works and what it's like. But I'd be intrigued to help them just because I think they're sort of, they're part of the fabric of society and maybe a bit, we all, when we need them, we call them, don't we? And we can be disparaging about them and ignore them and even to the extreme ends of, kind of hateful towards them. But when you need the police and you want law and order, you want it. So I think just that group came to mind for me.
Yeah. Oh, great! My sister's a police officer over in New Zealand these days, but she used to, her Warren used to be over in Hammersmith, but yeah, she's over in New Zealand now, and some of the work that she gets involved with in terms of, you know, the not only the variety of it, but also the burden that you've got to come home with. You've got to deal with that in the moment and then go home and deal with your family. You know, everybody's got a job, but some of these roles and some of the specific roles that can be involved with are psychologically being able to help people compartmentalize or just unwind, put something aside and say that's work, that's home, whatever that might be, to help people be at their best.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. Well, pass on my best to her and honestly let her know. I think she does a really important role, and any role where you can, in the matter of a normal working day, encounter something which is genuinely potentially traumatic, that's a role that deserves respect and support and a bit of love from all of us, I think.
Well, this has been far too kind to both friends and family here today.
I know. We're all about other people, Paul. What would you expect?
Yeah, exactly. So just flipping that on its head a little bit then, if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee, have a drink with any individual or even a team or organisation to help your performance, who would you want that to be?
I would love to sit down with some people who've been into space, astronauts. Wow. I've got this enduring moment for a bit of disclosure. My surname's Armstrong, and my wonderful brother's actually his first name is Neil. He's about my age. My parents named him Neil Armstrong. That is a whole other conversation. Totally irrespective of that, astronauts fascinate me. I think they clearly do a very special, unique job. They do it under immense high pressure. It requires teamwork. They're really pushing the boundaries of things. There's actually a bit of, I think, a service to humanity going on when they do what they do well, because they do everything from keeping the kind of communication satellites running through to more almost existential things about helping us question what is life all about and what's possible and our place in the universe. But above all, back to performance. I mean, they are in many ways the best of us, right? And they do extraordinary things. Wouldn't mind a couple of hours with an astronaut, get inside their head, might discover the truth about it. I'd love to find out they're just human beings as well, because I've probably got them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, I was at a work conference, and a guy called Chris Hadfield, who was a Canadian, and he was an astronaut. He was at NASA, spent a lot of time in space, and I saw him speak for about an hour. One of the most informative, inspirational, emotional best hours of my life. Right. Absolutely brilliant. And well, Chris Hadfield, if you do listen to this, I'll give you my contact details at the end. I probably can't afford him. But,
If we've got Chris or any other astronauts out there, then do get in touch with Gary.
Absolutely, I'm intrigued.
Which brings us to a lovely little segue into this final bit. But how do people get in touch? How do people find out more about you, about Pinnacle, about your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no mystery. So best thing, couple of ways to reach me. The old, I was going to say traditional way. Not sure it is that traditional, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Gary Armstrong, Pinnacle Coaching and Development. Pinnacle's got a website, and that's pinnaclecoaching.net. Through both of those, you can actually just find me. You can go ahead and get half an hour in my diary. You can look for a slot there, and watch out for the Run Alive podcast coming out. I think it's a few weeks, possibly months away from us unveiling it, and I'm not even sure what platform we'll be on yet. Let's say all the usual ones. We'll be doing that. But yeah, those are some of the ways you can reach me, and I'm sure we'll probably chuck my contact details in the show notes.
Certainly will. They'll all be there, all those links. And Gary, really appreciate the conversation today. Some fascinating stuff, and best of luck with Pinnacle and all the great work that you're doing from here on in.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Cheers now. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.